Meng Haoran, farewell to censor Wang Wei. Alone in the end, why have I been waiting? Returning each morning without purpose. Now I must go where grass is sweeter. Sadly, I must leave my old friend. On the road, who will help me? True friends are rare in this world. Only by embracing solitude shall I bear to close at last my humble gate. So we continue with yet another poem by Meng Haoran. The theme of this poem is one we've already encountered before, parting, which is one of the most common topics of scholar officials. Here the parting person, the person who is parting, is the writer of the poem, because in a lot of the parting poems, the poet is saying goodbye to a friend. So here, Meng Haoran is saying goodbye to a friend. We know that Wang Wei, who is a poet that we've talked about and that we've heard a lot in this collection, was, a friend and not exactly a protector or patron of sorts, but, at least a person to lend an arm and an ear to Meng Haoran's complaints and frustrations. And so Meng Haoran, at the time of writing this poem, has decided to leave the capital and to quit for good his search for office. We've already encountered a poem by his that was similar to this a couple of days ago. The one that was headed, "In the Twilight of the Year, I Return to the South." So this is another take of that poem, but more focalized on a specific friend to whom he is saying goodbye. So the topic, as I said, is basically parting and renunciation of office. So the poem has a bitter tone. After all, it's reflecting the frustration of Meng Haoran in his attempts to become a scholar official and to, satisfy Confucian ideals, and also his own self-esteem and pride in managing to, be of use to the nation. Okay, so those are the main topics. The retired life creeps in as a subtopic towards the end of the poem. As usual, let's take a look at the poem couplet by couplet and comment on some aspects that we encounter in it. So first couplet. Alone in the end, why have I been waiting? Returning each morning without purpose. So the poem opens with a rhetorical question, which is really a self-recrimination or a self-complaining question. All the work that Meng Haoran has done to try to achieve recognition, to try to get a position in the central government, all his visits to the court, all his search for friends and patrons and so forth, has been a useless effort. It has not fruited. And Meng Haoran has ended in defeat. So he asks rhetorically, he's alone now. I mean, he might have some friends and companions, but none that were able to push him forward in his ambitions and in his efforts. Alone in the end, we're all alone in the end. He asks, why have I been waiting? Why have I been trying uselessly, pointlessly, to get office, to get positions in office? Returning each morning, I imagine, to the imperial court or maybe to an academy, or maybe to the different houses of the different patrons from which he sought help and protection and advancement. So all those past activities that led me on that path have been a failure, are unsuccessful. They have not given any fruit. Second couplet. Now I must go where grass is sweeter. Sadly, I must leave my old friend. So the second couplet moves us to the present. The first couplet put the focus on what unsuccessfully Meng Haoran had been trying to achieve in the past. Now in the present he has made up his mind, as opposed to a previous poem of his that we read where, he wasn't happy at the capital, but hadn't decided yet on quitting. Yeah, remember that was Autumn Feelings from Qin, sent to Monk Juan, which we read 2 or 3 days ago. So here he has clearly decided that he is going to leave. Now I must go where the grass is sweeter. Sadly, I must leave my old friend. His old friend here is censor Wang Wei, evidently. So where the grass is sweeter. Now this image, seems to connect with some images we have in our own Western tradition. So the green pastures, the search for greener pastures, is an expression that is used a lot in English, for the search for a new place where one might prosper. And there might be an element of that here. Other translations or other interpretations of this line have put the focus on the fact that the reference to fragrant aromatic grass might be connecting the poet with the poetry of Chu Yuan. That's a poet that we've had occasion to talk about before. He was a late Warring States period writer, so approximately 300 BCE, who basically wrote and had an anthology composed around himself and his works, the Elegies of the South. And these poems they were poems mostly about a scholar official not being recognized by his king and, being very frustrated at that. And the images that were used in these poems, a lot of them were flowery images, where the poet generally equated himself with fragrant flowers and herbs, and their nice scent was equated to the virtue of the minister, a virtue that lies unrecognized. So perhaps this reference to sweet grass, I think in the original it's not exactly sweet grass, it's more like sweet smelling grass or something like that. It could also be a reference, not only I have to move to better pastures, but my worth, my fragrant virtue, which is like fragrant grass, has not been recognized, valued by the emperor or by the civil servants who could promote me. So that is over. We must move on, and we must say goodbye to Wang Wei, which is, on the face of it, the main reason for writing this poem. Third couplet. On the road, who will help me? True friends are rare in this world. So the third couplet pushes us towards the future. Remember, the first one was the past, the second what I'm going to do now, the third one is the future. I'm going to go on my way to the south, and Meng Haoran speculates. He's also being flattering, slightly flattering to Wang Wei, because he's saying, you are one of the good friends, and good friends in the world are hard to come by. So, the third couplet says, well, I'm on the road back home, I will probably find no help. Then again, he hadn't found enough help in the capital either, at least for the purposes of achieving a position. He says, true friends are rare in this world. So, Wang Wei, you are one of those true friends. Another way of interpreting the reference to the road is, again, from what I have seen in another translation of this text, is that the road in some texts of the Warring States period, and especially in one reference that was subsequently quoted or alluded to, the road this comes from the Menzu, the book of Mencius, one of the main Confucian philosophers. And in a context in that book, the road means the road to power and position. So somebody is having a conversation with Mencius and is saying, if you took the road to the state of Qi, how successful would you be? Would you be as successful as Guanzi, who was an old minister who had helped make the state of Qi a hegemonic power? So this reference to taking to the road seems to be, or could be, an allusion to, being able to occupy high positions of office. And, when he says, on the road, who help? Well, because the original Chinese would probably say something like, road, who help someone, or something like that. So instead of being a future reflection on the lack of assistance that Meng Haoran will find in his travels back home, it could be a reference to, again, to the lack of support he found in his own way to power and government. He says, who supported me on my way, on my attempt at becoming a minister? Probably nobody, because true friends are rare to find. True friends that could help me to achieve office and power. Perhaps Wang Wei is one of those few good friends. Finally, the concluding couplet. This one clearly, without any ambiguity, sets us in the future and in the changed mind frame that Meng Haoran has to adopt from now on. He's going to focus now on his future life as a hermit, no longer thinking about worldly ambition and courtly position. So what does he have to do? How does he have to change his mindset? It's very clear. Only by embracing solitude shall I bear to close at last my humble gate. So Chinese scholar officials were a very social group. And you can see this in the abundance of poems about drinking with other scholar officials, debating with other scholar officials, partying, going in outings, having parties for saying goodbye or hello. So the Chinese were part of a social culture. At least, if not all the Chinese, at least the scholar officials were part of a common culture where being with the group and being with the others was important. And you know, one of the horrors of being sent to the provinces was losing not only the gilded life of the court and of the capital, it was basically missing the company of scholar officials like yourself, of fellow souls and friends who were part of the cultured society, who were part of the group that you belonged to and whose cultural, political, social objectives and pleasures you wanted to pursue with them. So solitude is, one of the darkest things of being a hermit. Even though we get a lot of poems where hermits are visited by other hermits or by scholar officials themselves, it's a lonely life. Very different from the hustle and bustle of the court from which Meng Haoran was coming. And he's saying, I have to adapt to this mindset. I have to get used to solitude. I will close my gate and I will remain there with no further connections with the world. So quite a programmatic poem, and very illustrative, perhaps, of the change in Meng Haoran from the public-seeking figure to the private-seeking figure. At least if we take this poem at face value, and we have no reason why not to take it. After Meng Haoran retired from the capital, he served very briefly in a regional post under Zhang Juling, but he never decided to go back to the capital and to try again at the possibility of becoming an official. So quite a nice poem.